Chris, are you on the line?
Yeah, Don, I am on the line. I got so many windows open, I was having trouble finding my mute.
Okay, I'll leave you alone. I got on early just to make sure we're going to connect. So it looks like everything's going to be working.
Oh,
I'll leave you alone. I got on early just to make sure we're going to connect. So it looks like everything's going to be working.
yeah. I'm also live streaming, so I got to mute this because that's going to drive me nuts. There we go. All right, there. So the live streaming's working pretty good, and the Zoom meeting is up, and I think it's all good to go. So close this out. Let me start my video. There you go. Can you see me?
Yep,
Good. All right.
there you are on the banks of the Danube.
Actually, it's the banks of the Kansas River.
Yeah.
This is, this is the North Power. I'm standing at the North Power Plant looking to the south. I
Okay.
took this photo, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years ago. But this is what the day looks like actually. It's pretty dark out.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I was worried about getting that live stream set up, but that was actually pretty easy. All right, got some folks joining.
Well, this is my third Zoom meeting today, so I'm already warmed up.
Wow, that's great. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's great.
Well,
Oh,
yesterday was election day, so there were lots of conference calls this morning.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Are you on the election board or something like that?
Actually, I chaired the committee for a lady who was running for Congress up in Omaha.
Oh, okay.
I was her
Nice,
campaign chair.
nice,
And so I was part of that.
nice. Oh, that's
I am their token to the elderly.
token, huh? I don't
Yeah,
know. Okay. Well, how'd it turn out?
victorious.
Excellent. Good to hear.
He's on the front page of the Omaha World Herald today.
All right.
Very
Excellent.
pleased with it.
Good deal. Always just little good news these days.
And we did it all by not taking PAC money and not going negative.
Wow. Wow.
There's still some hope. As long as you hang around with 25 and 30-year-olds, the world's a great place.
Yeah, yeah, they haven't been jaded yet
Yeah, yeah.
or something like that.
What do you think? I don't think this meeting's going to take more than about an hour.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't think
care.
so. Yeah, I don't either. I'm just here. I If it does take more than an hour, I mean that's fine. I just hope the internet connections for everybody stay solid long enough to get through it.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm a little worried. Well, not worried, but Sharon Schwartz, our advisor, she's never used Zoom before, and I don't know how that's going to work out for her. So we'll have to play that by ear. She's supposed to have a report this morning, and if she doesn't, well, we'll skip over that part. But um, yeah, that's
And
about
she's
it.
doing it from home.
Yeah,
Does she have anybody in her family who's got some experience with information technology?
Not to my knowledge. So,
But Zoom is pretty user friendly. I mean, you can be fairly uneducated in the ways of electronic communication and still get through it.
yeah, I think even if, you know, even if you just called in, that would certainly do it for this meeting. Um, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right, let's see. I have got so much going on this screen. It's not even funny.
Can you pronounce your last name again?
Betel. It's like a B and then an 8 and then an EL. Betel.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And is my audio okay? Because I've got this microphone here. I'm standing a little ways away from it.
I would turn it up a little.
Okay. Yeah, I think I can do that. There we go. Uh-oh.
Thank you for doing these annotations. They make it easy.
Yeah, good. I hope that works out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Take that. Take that. Okay.
Let me, hold on, I am.
Now let's see. Might need to make the volume a little louder.
We can see you, Larry.
See him? Good.
Yeah,
Good.
Absolutely.
We're new at this game.
That's doing great.
If you can't hear him, we can turn that volume up.
we'll have to turn it up till I can, well.
This looks so low. Maybe it's closer. That don't look like they go.
Okay, where's the line of control?
Here. This one. That should be enough. Let's see. That'll go away.
What do I do to get the mic on?
It's on. It should be on.
I'm not hearing any.
It's on. We can hear you, Larry.
Can you hear him? Good.
Okay,
Yep,
you
we
can
can
see
hear.
I'm not Zoom literate. That was
Yeah,
secretary
well,
with me, the boss.
You're doing good for the first time.
Okay. I'll turn that TV off.
Hey, Lizzie, do you want to put up the agenda? And I want to see what it looks like if you, when you do that, and see what I need to do to rearrange it so I can see all the people and the agenda. And when she does this, I think there's a way to move the sliders so that the agenda is smaller and the pictures of the people are bigger, or vice versa. So if you do that, Lizzie, we can.
So I'm going to share my screen now.
Yep, great, that worked. And at least in mine, everybody popped over to the right-hand side, and I know that there's a bar you can grab right between the pictures of people and the document, and you can drag that bar, and you can make the document size smaller and the people larger if you're so inclined.
Can I leave my coffee cup in there? You hear him?
Oh, yeah. It's right now.
Welcome to the Kansas-Nebraska Big Blue River Compact Administration 47th Annual Meeting. Today is May 13th, 2020. My name is W. Don Nelson, and I am the chairman of the Compact. It is 9:30 a.m. Central Daylight Time, and we are holding this meeting by way of Zoom video conference call with screen sharing. You can either view us on the Zoom meeting platform or the YouTube live stream. This year, we will introduce the members of the administration and committee members, and those presenting to the administration will introduce themselves at that time. Because of the nature of having a public meeting by conference call, we will not try to get everyone attending to introduce themselves the way we have traditionally done so. Instead, if you'd like to have your attendance at the meeting noted, please use the chat tool at the bottom of your Zoom screen, near the middle too, and send a message with your name on it so we can record your presence. At this time, I'd like to introduce Jesse Bradley from Nebraska, who will in turn introduce the members of the Nebraska delegation.
Thanks, Don. I'll do my best here to capture the participants I see on the list with the Zoom session. First of all, I guess I'd ask, look for a thumbs up from folks that everybody's able to hear me okay. Okay, thanks, Chris, Don. So Participants from our agency, the list I have here is, we have Carrie Weiss, Emily Rose, Jeremy Gailey, Jim Ostick, Justin Hedlick, Amy Zoller, and Andy in our water planning group. And then I see Marty Link is on from DEE. And I think from the NRDs, I saw that Kyle was on from Little Blue NRD, Kyle Hochschild, Dave Claybaugh from Lower Big Blue NRD, Dave Eichenberg, Jack Wergen, and Marie. I think we're all on from Upper Big Blue. And then, of course, I see Mr. Larry Moore there as Nebraska's rep there. So I think that's everybody from the Nebraska contingent that I saw.
Chris Badel will now introduce the Kansas delegation.
Thanks, Don. I'll just go like Jesse did through the list of the folks that I see. I see Brittany Grother there with our Office of the Secretary, Lizzie Hickman, who will later be serving a greater role in the compact administration. Thank you, Lizzie. Katie Teetsort is our representative to the Engineering Committee and also our Water Commissioner at the Topeka Field Office. Kenneth Titus, our Chief Counsel. I see he's there and on the Legal Committee. And oh, there's Tom Stiles from our Kansas Department of Health and Environment. I'm glad he could make it. I think that is it from the Kansas side so far. We're hoping that our advisory member, Sharon Schwartz, is able to make it, but I don't see her yet. So we'll just play that by ear. Thanks, Don. I think that's it for us.
The Zoom meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. If you only want to attend the meeting but don't plan to participate, please consider watching on the live stream. The link to the live stream is on Kansas's website at agriculture, spelled out, .ks, as in Kilo Sierra, .gov/BBRC. It is also posted at the top of the Zoom chat, where you can cut and paste it into a web browser if you are so inclined. You will also find the written reports that have been provided to the administration on that same website. Reports that were not provided before today's meeting will be posted after the meeting as soon as they become available. If you are attending by Zoom and you've not already done so, please consider joining by computer audio so we can see your name and interact with you more easily if we need to. Please keep your microphone muted and your camera off unless you need to address the administration. Thank you. At this point, we will move on to agenda item number 3, the minutes and the report of the 46th annual meeting. Chris, would you like to do the honors?
Yes, thank you, Don. I am the secretary for the administration, and Kansas is responsible for preparing the minutes. However, this year I've delegated the preparation of the minutes to Elizabeth Hickman of our staff, and she is going to take care of that under agenda item number 7, if that please the administration.
Ordered.
Is that okay? Thank you.
This year, moving on to agenda item number 4, it seems like the only appropriate report from the chair you've already experienced. We're living through this new day and age. As part of the official report, Chris Badel's credentials in writing to serve as the Kansas ex officio member to the administration have been submitted to the office. As chair, I make full notation of the receipt and make them part of the record, if you would, Mr. Secretary.
Will do. Thank you.
Chris, it is now time to move into the Kansas report.
Okay. Thank you. Well, first of all, welcome everyone to Zoom. And if this is your first experience being live streamed, congratulations on that too. So I'll just start out my report as usual with, we'll go through the Kansas Legislature and some statewide conservation activities. When I'm done, if Sharon Schwartz is on the line, we'll turn to her for a report. And if she's not, we'll go straight to Katie Teetsort after that. So I'll just begin with the Kansas Legislature is still technically in session, but because of the COVID-19 pandemic, they haven't met for several weeks, but they're just now slowly beginning to return as committees. This year, the legislature considered several water-related activities, but nothing terribly significant. The past several legislatures have worked to clarify some of our water management tools. This year, they made some small tweaks to the multi-year flex account, but again, nothing terribly significant there. As with most states these days, because of the coronavirus pandemic, budget issues are looming larger than ever. Our consensus revenue estimating group forecasted that the economic fallout in Kansas from the coronavirus is something on the order of $1.2 billion, down from what was forecast for revenues just a few months ago. So that same group estimates that in Kansas, at least, the economy won't return to 2019 levels until at least the year 2022. So we'll see how that goes. Some rosier news. I want to report on some things going on in water conservation. Kansas's Northwest Groundwater Management District number 4 continues to be the model of local leadership. GMD4 helped create the local enhanced management area tool, and so far that GMD has the only 2 LEMAs in the state. And our recent analysis shows that these LEMAs are actually changing irrigators' behaviors and saving significant amounts of water. On top of that, recently the GMD board has directed their executive director to come up with a master irrigator program similar to what they have in Texas and Colorado. And these are programs where irrigators get together with their peers to share best practices and maximize irrigation management and conservation technologies and have those work together so that they can conserve energy, save water, and build soil health, and ultimately enhance farm profitability. Our Western Kansas Groundwater Management District 1, the board there recently submitted a formal request to begin LEMA hearings in Wichita County. So their proposed LEMA would save somewhere between 15 and 21% from historical use, and the range there is because participation by vested water rights is voluntary. So depending on the level of that participation, that's kind of the range of savings that they're looking at. And this action is desperately needed in the area where there's on the order of 20 feet of saturated thickness left. So we haven't been able to begin the hearing process on that LEMA because of the pandemic, of course, but as soon as we're able to have public meetings again in person, we'll get that done as soon as we can. One of the things that we're working on in conjunction with these management tools are refining our methods to determine how the management tools are working and some sort of scientific, more rigorous evaluation of their performance. And so over the past couple of years, we've been working on a method that establishes a relationship between the seasonal precipitation and the irrigation application. And we use that to predict future behavior, and then we see what happens while operating under the management program to see if that future behavior has changed. And what we've seen is in the Sheridan 6 Lima, again in GMD4. Those folks used an average of 30% less water than their peers, given the same hydrologic conditions. And in our first evaluation of the first couple of years of GMD4's district-wide Lima, we're seeing similar trends with something around 30% savings. So it's very encouraging. We also use that tool to evaluate our multi-year flex account tool. That tool is not a conservation tool necessarily, but allows producers to use their water rights, use their allocation over a 5-year period. So they get a 5-year chunk of water to use. And the main thing there was we needed to prove that they weren't expanding use with that tool. And our evaluation of the Precip irrigation has proven that. So we made that report to the legislature this year. We've also seen continued interest and success in the water conservation area tool. This tool allows a water right owner or group of owners to get together and enter into a consent agreement with the chief engineer to to save some water, and in exchange for that, they have some flexibility to move their water rights around a little bit. So, as of last week, we have 53 water conservation area plans approved, covering about 86,000 acres, with an estimated annual savings of about 12,000 acre feet. So that's good. We have a lot of room for growth there, but we're encouraged by the level of adoption so far. Kansas also has 15 water technology farms, and these are demonstration projects basically where industry, academia, producers get together. They partner to test innovations in irrigation technology on real farms to provide that real world experience and to show their neighbors how these things can work in real life. So there's 15 of those, and we hope to expand that program as well. So we're working, we're encouraged by the success of the management tools and working hard to increase their adoption and improve our understanding of them. I guess I'll finish up by noting some changes to the Kansas delegation. On February 29th of this year, Chief Engineer David Barfield retired after 35 years of service, including 12 years as Chief Engineer and ex officio member of the Compact Administration. So Kansas will, later in the agenda, offer a resolution honoring Mr. Barfield's service to the Compact. Following David's retirement, I was appointed acting chief engineer, and I'm honored to serve the Compact as Kansas ex officio member until such time as a permanent replacement is named for the position. As I mentioned earlier, I currently serve as secretary to the administration. At the appropriate time in today's agenda, I will nominate Elizabeth Hickman to replace me in serving secretary of the administration. And also, I will appoint her, if everyone is willing, to the engineering committee and the finance committee too. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes my report, and I'd stand for any questions anyone has. Okay, thanks. I don't see Sharon on the call yet, so I guess at this time I would like to turn it over to Katie Teetsort. And Katie, would you like your report shown as you give it, or do you just want to go through it orally? And you're on mute, by the way. You're on mute, Katie.
I'm going to go through it orally, so it's fine if we don't show it. It is available on the website for the Compact meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Good morning, everybody. This is an unusual way to have our Compact meeting, and I do have to say that I missed catching up with each of you as we started out this morning. I'm used to that every year, and I missed it. So to kind of delve right into the report, I start with climactic conditions and the precip and temperatures. This year, well, last year, 2019 was a pretty interesting year. The basin received between 37.5 and 52.5 inches of precip for the calendar year. And most of the tributary basins with the Far East Black Vermilion receiving up to 60 inches. So that's pretty significantly above normal in 2019 and did range from 8 to 20 inches in excess of our normal precipitation. This year, we have received 2 to 10 inches across the basin so far, with the western side receiving 2 to 4, and the eastern side in the Black Vermilion getting about 4 to 10 inches through March 31st. We've seen slightly below normal conditions in the northern part of the basin, with the south getting a little bit more normal precipitation. We'll see how this next week pans out with a lot of rain forecast. So temperatures in calendar year 2019 remain generally normal to about 2 degrees cooler than normal. And in spring, at least through March 31st, it looked like we were starting to trend warmer with about 3 degrees of warmer than normal. But I'd beg to say that if I re-reviewed this for the April and May data so far, we'd probably see that trend was a little bit cooler for April and May. Our standardized precipitation index, not surprisingly, showed a pretty wet trend for 2019 with a more normal trend so far this year. For stream flow and administration within the Big Blue River Compact Basin area. So really the story of 2019, as I'm sure we're going to hear from pretty much everybody, was the flooding. And stream flow was higher than median throughout the seasons in our MDS gauges at Marysville and Barnes. We do have minimum desirable stream flow at those gauges, but we did not trigger minimum desirable stream flow within the basin in 2019, nor have we in 2020. Again, most flows were well above median values. Same thing pretty much really at Barneston and Hollandburg. And I do know that the USGS will be providing their report later. Really other than just saying that it was a pretty wet year and we avoided any administration throughout the entire basin for 2019 was the statement to make. Reality was, for the very first time in a long time, no administration occurred in the state of Kansas in 2020. So that included MDS or any type on any of our gauges statewide. It was really much the opposite case. Our elevations in our federal reservoirs were at record elevations in some cases. Our lower Kansas basin projects did observe record reservoir elevations, and we had widespread flooding. The Kansas River Basin reservoirs, including the Tuttle Creek Reservoir, I managed to the control point on the Missouri River at the USGS gauge at Waverly, Missouri. So when flows are greater than 80,000 CFS at that gauge, our reservoir releases on our Kansas projects are lowered to minimum. We had this happen once the April-May rains hit in 2019 through almost the entire duration of 2019. We did have the Corps put in place a series of deviations. They started in May at that Waverly gauge and allowed for releases from the reservoirs that wouldn't have been allowed under the control manuals. So those occurred in phases, and they ranged from 90,000 CFS to 180,000 CFS at Waverly. And we were allowed to release from the pools when the reservoir elevations hit the upper 20th% of the pool. That deviation stayed in place through the remainder and didn't get lifted until 2020. We managed to get into the normal pool range within 2 of those 3 main reservoirs on our Kansas system, but now we're seeing those reservoirs climb again as recent rains have created inflow conditions. And with restrictions again at Waverly at the 80,000 value, we have gone down to minimum several times and been able to bring it back up, but we're increasing our pool levels right now. Previously, we reported that the Lower Republican River Stakeholder Group was working to establish a special district. The bylaws were instituted and the board was put in place. But further progress wasn't made with significant flooding last year, and the recent COVID-19 issues focused largely upon the necessary legislation was not put in place to authorize the district. So that that's still waiting to move forward. Our compliance and enforcement activities in 2019, we sent notices of non-compliance or notices of non-compliance cease diversion orders on 11 files in eastern Kansas and 130 files statewide. I do have a graphic there that depicts this. None of these happen to be within the compact area. In 2019, the Topeka Field Office issued 16 penalty orders and cease and desist orders. 2 of them were in the compact area. Both of these civil penalties were issued for overpumping at a $5,000 penalty each to a rural water district, unfortunately, that got caught up in overpumping and not understanding their water rights. Statewide, DWR issued 206 penalties. In 2020, we haven't issued any notices of non-compliance or notice of non-compliance cease diversions in the compact area. So this graphic is showing the penalty orders issued and depicts where those occurred by color and by year. So we reported last year that the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture instituted a paper filing fee of $20 per file for the required annual water use report. Now that fee was waived if the owner opted to go online and use our online filing system. So for the 2018 year reports that were filed in paper, we collected $39,567 in filing fees. And so far in 2020, for the 2019 year, we collected $29,340. So statewide, our assessment of 274 civil penalties in 2018 came to a total of $1.446 million. We collected $411,450 of that value. 2018 was a record year for penalty issues and the highest numbers of fines ever collected. And that total fine amount was actually greater than our previous 14 years of our compliance and enforcement penalty totals combined. So we assessed $400,000 in civil penalties for 2019, and we've so far collected $309,500 of those. Part of this was due to settlement conferences. So we opted folks to be able to provide additional information and things to consider in these penalties that we were enacting. So in 2018, we had 228 of the 274 penalties issued request a conference, which was 83% of the total. That certainly had a significant legal and staff bearing on the time involved in all of those. So what we did in 2019 is we issued the penalties at what we would have allowed under settlement and tried to kind of do all that work up front. So we only had 19 settlement conferences out of the 91 penalty orders for 2019. So we're just reviewing the lists for 2019 use right now, but I can say that we clearly don't have anybody in the compact area that's going to get any penalties. Flooding does not bring overpumping, at least in eastern Kansas. So that's kind of our compliance and enforcement summary for this point. For new development in the Basin, we had 17 new applications in 2019 filed, 13 appropriations, 2 temporaries and a term, same as in 2018. We've only had 1 new application this year. The agricultural economy has lessened the pace at which we have been receiving applications. So we did approve 12 applications in the Basin area in 2019. And in 2020, so far, we've approved 1. It's just a term permit. Statewide in 2019, we had 154 regular appropriations filed, 136 were approved, and 18 were dismissed. There was also term permits and temporary permits that were issued. Lake level management plans, kind of the same. We are basically managing those pools or intending to manage those pools for lake fishery aspects, recruitment of fish and endangered species. But pretty much for 2019, that was all overridden by the flooding problems that we had. And we'll see how this year goes. There is, I guess I'd say, a tentativeness on managing higher pools going into spring after what happened last year. The state did, under the Water Vision 2018, kick off a Kansas River Basin study called the Kansas River Reservoirs Flood and Sediment Study. The plan here is to try to understand and determine what's needed to extend the life of the reservoirs and then take the steps to do so. The Kansas Geological Survey did begin to establish a network of alluvial observation wells that they're now operating under the Kansas Index Well program. And you can see that I've stolen this graphic from them showing where those alluvial wells that they put in place to this point are located. So we look forward to getting information about the Kansas River system from this study. So kind of other topics going on to finish up today. In 2019, I reported that we had sort of just kicked off an effort to scan all of our hard copy water right files to our DocuWare system, which is our official state archival system now. We scan the files, the hard water right files, page by page, and index them into this system. We quality control them page by page, and then provide that file back to the owner and work off of the electronic files. So I can report that as of yesterday, we exceeded 50% of all files scanned. So that's been a big initiative, and that pretty much every staff member has worked on. We have a temporary person who is working on that. Their hours are going to finish up in the beginning of June. We hope to be able to continue this initiative so we can finish the project off over the next 12 to 18 months. As part of that effort to go paperless, we pioneered electronic processes for all documentation, including our field work. So pretty much everything that we generate in our office now, with the single exception of approval documents and of changes and new applications were actually generated out of headquarters, are processed electronically. We accept most of our forms, notifications, reporting, and other information from our customers electronically, and we're trying to work on the electronic application process next. These efforts, while they started to become a paperless office, really rewarded us with the COVID-19 pandemic hitting, as our staff has been able to work while I'm here in our office. The staff has been able to work remotely in all cases, and absolutely be able to conduct business as normal and assist our customers in the way we always could with these files available to them electronically. Finally, the final piece was kind of in the middle of everything hitting, when the COVID-19 hit and some of our staff were required to take some administrative leave. We were in the middle of our field office move to our new location. Our KDA agricultural lab moved to a new building in Manhattan adjacent to our headquarters building. And we, as part of that, located in the old location at Forbes Field, ended up moving across town. So we're right off the I-70 strip. And we have a group of 16 water specialists that will be housed here when we can ever get back to work again in the office. So right now I'm here alone every day in the nice new office. And we're located at 1131 Southwest Winding Road in Suite 400 now. All of our phone numbers have stayed the same, so you can still contact us in the same way. And we just, as a side note, are in a building that also houses the USDA APHIS location. So that concludes my report. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Katie. I think Sharon Schwartz might be on the phone. I see a phone number that has popped up that I don't recognize. Are you there, Sharon?
Yes.
Great.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
We can
I
hear you.
tried to get in on the computer and I wasn't able to do it, so here I am.
Well, we're glad to have you.
Thank you.
If you have a report, we're finishing up the Kansas reports right now. So if you've got a report, we'd love
Okay,
to hear it.
I missed part of the reports, including yours, but I guess the main thing that I have to say is, and maybe I think you were going to touch on the budget for one thing right now, the state. Have you done that already?
Yeah, I just
But-
briefly mentioned
Consensus revenue estimate and the issues
Yes.
there.
yeah, I
Okay,
briefly touched on
what I
that.
can tell, okay, and what I can tell you, I did visit with Chairman Highland, who's the chair of Ag and Natural Resources, about a number of issues. And of course, one of them, there was a lot of focus this year on water because of the flooding and so forth. And so he had, actually, if I'm repeating something, you'll just have to tell me we already covered that. But I know that he had called a special meeting, committee meeting, just to deal with water issues. And from the committees anymore, you know, the legislators are very few that are familiar with ag issues and specifically water issues. A lot of them are urban legislators that are on ag and natural resources. So I think what he did was really a good idea. He said that it really created a lot of interest. People that didn't understand all the water issues that we have in this period, besides the flooding, it was just how they affected everyone, whether you live in a town or the rural areas. So it was I think a really good special committee meeting. It was a joint committee meeting, special committee meeting. And he said since then, well, in the relationship with the Appropriations Committee, the chairman there focused, right, because of things that were identified during that special committee meeting, they put a lot of emphasis and were able to put budget money towards issues in Kansas and water issues, which we've struggled with in times past because people didn't think that was that important. And, you know, whether it had to do with dam repairs, I know money went into that, watershed dam repairs and stream bank repairs. And the other things they dealt with had to do with water rights and water quality. So, you know, the good news was there was money in the budget, put in the budget recommended for a focus on water issues. For the first time in a long time, they were able to put money in, and then, which I understand Chris has covered, well, then they come up with a consensus revenue prediction and predicting a 1.2 billion drop in revenue. So I don't know what's going to happen. I know that visiting with the chair, again, they said, you know, that whether I don't think the legislature, they're not planning on coming back and revisiting the budget line by line. So it may be come back to allotments by the governor. So it's going to be, I'll have my eye on it, and I know a lot of other people will too, to see what happens. You know, there's some areas of the budget that are going to be hard. It'll be hard for somebody to want to touch, education for one. So my concerns are that they'll focus on some of the other areas that aren't, people think, well, it's not that important. Just my opinion from past experience on the committees and so forth. So that's the main things that I wanted to talk about. I really appreciate this opportunity to continue to be able to stay involved with what's going on. I know that personally for us, as we farm on the tributaries of the Little Blue, there was a lot of damage on the stream banks and back into fields and ditches and stuff that have taken a lot of repair work to be able to get them back in before they create more problems. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. That's pretty brief, but that's in a nutshell what I had to report.
Well, thank you, Sharon. And actually, I hadn't covered in detail a lot of the things that you were talking about, the money in the budget for the water issues. I pretty much focused on the, well, I didn't just briefly mention the consensus revenue estimating group's report and kind of dire outlook.
Well,
So
that's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
is.
well, it's a big one. I don't know, you know, when we look at the big picture of what's going to happen this year, I know I listened to Katie, and the fact that you can do so many things anymore virtual, except for this person that couldn't get on Zoom this morning.
You'll get it next time.
I'll do it the next time anyway. I was afraid to try it before this morning because I thought, I wonder what'll happen if I tried it. So anyway, besides that, well, I look forward to the rest of the meeting. Thank you so much for allowing me to give a short, brief report.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the Kansas reports. Thank you.
Jesse Bradley, would you like to present the Nebraska report with your teammates?
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. We provided a written copy. I think that's been made available by Kansas. I'll just kind of go through some highlights, I guess, here in Nebraska, and then I'll also have our field office give a little bit of our water administration report, and then let each of the NRDs go through their individual reports as well. First of all, obviously want to start off by thanking Chris and his team for setting this up. I know it's a little bit of additional work to try to accommodate this many people through a Zoom session, so certainly appreciate everything you guys have done to make this work smoothly today. Also want to thank all the natural resource districts and other state and local agencies that partner with us in managing the resources in the basin, and of course all the producers and the work they do to protect the resources in the basin. You know, I guess I'd also like to thank our staff. I mean, just like everybody, we had to jump into pretty quick action to kind of get into this telecommuting mode, and it's been pretty amazing to see how everybody's come together and done that fairly seamlessly, and how we went from, you know, our office is still open. We are still having public come in, but we've probably got 95% of our folks telecommuting at this point in time, which we're fortunate to be able to do, and they've continued to do a great job. So appreciate that. I guess just kind of quickly, you know, I heard the report there on water supply conditions. I think everybody knows that 2019 was an incredible water year in terms of the amount of supply. And the Little Blue, Big Blue basins were no exception to that. Certainly saw well above normal precipitation, and you know, I think we saw record peak stages at some of our gauges in the basin as well. So that was the case across most of eastern Nebraska, particularly in the Missouri River. So this basin was not left out of that. But yeah, and that certainly, with regard to the compact, created a situation that Katie touched on, where we didn't really need to do administration in Nebraska either, for this basin anyway, under the compact requirements, because of the water supply conditions we had in 2019. We tend to give quite a bit of updates on our water planning efforts. Those are sort of a continued commitment by the state and NRDs to advance forward on our what we call integrated management planning efforts, the way we kind of go about doing state water planning. And so those efforts continued to advance in 2019. We had some pretty significant milestones where we were able to adopt our first basin-wide plan in the Republican River Basin. We actually went through completion of our first 10-year increment. There's a defined 10-year increment of planning in the Upper Platte Basin that we completed, and then transitioned to a second increment, which required years of stakeholder meetings, development of a modified basin-wide plan, and modifications to 5 NRD individual integrated management plans. So a lot of work goes into that. and a pretty significant task to get completed in 2019. We've also got specific planning efforts going on in the Little Blue and Big Blue River basins. We were able to work with Tri-Basin NRD, which has a small portion of the Little Blue Basin in it as well, and then the Little Blue NRD to get voluntary IMPs adopted in those areas. And so those become an important, first step just to improve communication, coordination between our agency, the local natural resource districts and producers, sort of set up a more holistic approach to water management, and really focus on promoting sharing data and cooperating on the development of tools, models, and other things we need to be able to proactively manage the water resources in those areas. So that was a good accomplishment. Look forward to implementing those plans over the next years and decades with those folks. We've also, continued to push forward in the Big Blue River Basin with Upper Big Blue NRD. If you recall, I think from last year's report, we shared a little bit about the kind of unique approach for us where we were trying to do joint stakeholder meetings with our sister agency, DEE, where they were working on a 319 watershed water quality plan, and we were trying to put together our integrated management plan. We brought stakeholder groups together and tried to do that in a joint fashion. I think we see that as a success. It helps streamline and those communications and get everybody in the room around these important issues. As we know, water quality and water quantity are obviously very connected in a lot of the cases. So I think that was a successful effort. We look forward to continuing to advance that planning effort with the Upper Big Blue NRD and hopefully kind of get that to completion here in this year, if possible. And then, we're also initiating efforts with the Lower Big Blue NRD. We've kind of working to get the stakeholders identified, and then we'll be working to get that process underway here this year as well. So a lot of water planning activities continuing to go on across the entire state. And so that's, something that we really focus a lot of resources on. We've also continued our voluntary water use program. We've now implemented that statewide. So this is for surface water users, particularly through our agency. We put out a call for folks to be able to come to our online system and voluntarily report on their surface water use each year. We tend to get about 25% voluntary participation in that process, but there are areas of the state like the Republican River Basin where that type of reporting is required. So we also use it in those areas as well. And then there's some other areas as well that have some required reporting that goes along with them. But continuing to make improvements there, trying to make sure that we can bring that data into the fold as we try to use it in our planning. Also, legislative updates here in Nebraska. We too were sort of in the middle of our session when all of this began. And so our legislature still has 17 days remaining in their session, of which they can, complete that anytime here in this calendar year. And we do expect, I think currently, that they will come back into session at some point in time. There still are some important matters like our mid-biennial budget adjustments that need to be adopted by the legislature. That all kind of got put on hold with COVID-19, but we look for them to be coming back into session at some point in time and work through some of those issues. And, of course, before all of the budget turndowns and everything that started to occur with COVID-19, there was a lot of interest playing off of what happened in 2019 to begin to look at flood mitigation planning and other efforts across the state. And so we did have some bills that were sort of out there, but they were primarily focused more in the flood management arena. And some of those had a little bit of appropriations with them to continue to advance on some of the studies and work. Particularly, we're continuing to advance efforts on the Missouri River with the other 3 lower basin states and working with the Corps to try to get to a place where we can actually get, some improvements made in that system that will give some of those folks along the Missouri River relief from future flooding. We don't have necessarily a full analysis yet that's been developed in terms of what the overall budget impacts will be. Early projections were that revenues for the quarter were going to be down, $300–400 million. But with all the stimulus dollars that are coming in to support COVID-19 efforts and how those get distributed, I think there's still some questions, I think, up in the air a little bit of what the final budget implications will be to the state of Nebraska. So don't have kind of any specific details on that just yet, but we'll certainly be monitoring that, and like Kansas, would expect that there's going to be some challenging times ahead for us and as it relates to budgets. Turning to water sustainability, that fund, that's a fund that the state of Nebraska uses for a variety of projects, for things like designing flood control structures to improving aging infrastructure, water supply projects. There's been examples of projects developed in the Little Blue and Upper Big Blue NRD. So, last year there's a commission that oversees those funds and makes the decisions on how they get distributed. They approved a number of projects and obligated about $15 million of funds to those projects. And there certainly has been a number of projects, like I said, in the Blue River Basin. There's a table in our written report if you have interest in kind of reviewing the specific projects that have been funded amongst the various NRDs. We're currently anticipating that there'll be about $8 million available in that fund for this next cycle, which will begin on kind of mid-July. Applications are due by the end of July, and then final funding decisions and obligations would be made by the end of the calendar year. So at least that's the plan right now. We'll see if budgets and other things get in the way of that plan, but currently there'd be still some money there to continue forward on those projects. Like Chris, I sort of sit here in an interim role, and so we too had our director go ahead and decide to retire. That happened about the same time as State Engineer Barfield did at the end of February. I guess technically it was February 28th, not 29th, that Jeff selected. But yeah, so Jeff's moved on into retirement. Jeff Fassett, our former director, after serving for about 4.5 years. And there certainly is an effort going on right now to look for a replacement for Jeff. The process, as it was kind of used last time, was to do an advertisement across sort of national publications as well, and then use a little bit of a search committee group that was going to help identify candidates and maybe vet some of those candidates for potential interviews with the governor. So that process is ongoing. We don't have a specific time frame necessarily, and obviously makes it a little more challenging with everybody's focus being on COVID-19 right now to really be thinking too much about that. But we'll sort of see how that process plays out, but we'll hopefully see them work through that here sometime this year. I think with that, I would just want to again thank Kansas for being a good partner and continuing to work with us in this compact and our other interstate agreements as well. And appreciate everything you guys did to make this Zoom session work well. And I guess with that, I'll turn it over to Jeremy Gailey, who's going to do our water administration report. And then we can go through each of the NRD's reports after that. And I'd take any questions too if folks wanted to add anything into the chat box there.
All right, not seeing any questions. Hello, my name is Jeremy Gailey. I'm the Water Administration Division Manager for the Department of Natural Resources. Much the same as our neighbors in Kansas, Nebraska, both Big and Little Blue River basins received above average rainfall, and we actually had really nice summer temperatures. As a result, we didn't have to issue any closing orders for target flows related to the compact or any individual water rights as well. Department staff was out in the field and observed each surface water appropriation. Anecdotally, we ran across a lot of folks who this was the first time in their recollection that they simply didn't need to irrigate due to the timeliness of the precipitation. Needless to say, it was one of the best years in the 20 years that I've been here in terms of water administration in the Blue River basins. This year we've been a little bit drier as of late. The May 7th U.S. drought monitor indicates normally dry conditions are starting to creep along our southern borders that include both the Little and Big Blue River basins in Nebraska. Quick look at the USGS sites for Barniston shows slightly below average long-term median flows based on 87 years of record, but flows at the Hollenberg gauge are actually just below the 25th percentile for the long-term medians based on 46 years of record. So we're hoping to get some rain here in the short term, or we'll be coordinating quite a bit with Katie this summer. Also, a final note here for Katie's benefit, I'd like to thank Jim Ostick for his 5 or 6 years of service in the Lincoln Field office. Jim got sequestered back to work in the Platte River Basin on issues with the Platte River. Just a few months ago, Holland was named as the Lincoln Field Office Supervisor, area that will oversee the Blue River Compact compliance. His phone number stays exactly the same. So if we need to get in contact with anyone from the Lincoln Field Office, Katie, you can the same number. But, that concludes the administration report for Nebraska this year.
Well, I guess we'll turn it over to the NRDs to go through their reports. I guess Dave Claybaugh, would you mind starting off?
Sure. Do I need to be unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Very good. Very good. Well, thanks, Jesse. I submitted a one-page brief report, and I will maintain that attitude when I do this. Is very brief. I think the great news about flooding, I guess we had a real nice increase in our groundwater levels, probably from last spring to this spring, from 19 to 20. We had an average increase of nearly 3 feet in our groundwater levels. We did see some pretty significant increases even from our spring to fall levels. So usually that's a decline. So that was the good news, I guess, about the flooding. So we have a lot of our wells are actually above our 1982 baseline. So that was good news in several areas of our district. Of course, I'd be remiss not to be bragging about the watershed capital of Nebraska we have here in the lower Big Blue. We continue to monitor all our structures, continue to rehab them. In the past, I've spoken of our snap tight inserts that we have been using with DNR's approval to insert through the principal spillways of some of our aging structures that are leaking or rusted out. That's a big help to us. It's about half the cost. Otherwise, we would have to breach those dams, dig through them, and replace that tube. So this has been really helpful for us, and you can do this project. My crews, my staff have been doing that. In fact, they even helped the Upper Big Blue this past year with an insert in one of their watershed structures. So they're being pretty proficient at it, and I hope I can keep them at it, because so far it's been a good cost saver for us, and it gets our structures some more life that they need. Other projects we're doing rehabs. We had one structure that went to a high hazard structure. The classification changed. Working with the NRCS, that's nearing completion now. Of course, we had to enlarge the principal spillway and the emergency spillway in that structure to handle bigger flows that the high hazard structure needed to do. We've been working with the city of Wilbur on a small dam we have located in town. We have rehabbed that structure, and the town is making a park out of that area with trails, hiking paths, restrooms, fishing pier type thing. That was a structure that kind of sat unused for many years, and it's located near the high school. So the high school is going to work with us in the city to develop outdoor classrooms and be able to utilize that area. So that's a nice project to do when you're working with communities. We've also applied through NRCS for a watershed and flood protection operations plan in the Little Indian watershed, which is located north of Beatrice, basically along Highway 80 or 77. That was a pilot project back in the 50s. So we hope to revisit that and maybe come up with some new structures or rehab some of the older structures in there. A lot of those were small grade stave structures that probably need some maintenance and maybe some new tubes in some of the smaller ones. So this will take a look at that and see what we need to do going in the future. I guess I'll wrap that up. Most of everything's in that little report. Jesse did mention that we are working with DNR on a voluntary integrated management plan. Right now, we're looking for stakeholders. And with the current environment, it's going to be interesting to have stakeholder meetings if we have to do it via Zoom. I know from an NRD perspective, we had our last board meeting via Zoom, and put it mildly, it was pretty interesting, I guess. So we're going to have to do that again this month, I believe. So we're learning as we go. But having stakeholder meetings via Zoom and discussion is going to be interesting thing for us to work on and see how that works for everyone. But with that, I'll conclude the Lower Big Blue report and appreciate Kansas for putting it together. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I I agree, Dave. It'll be interesting to see how we start to engage with stakeholders and do the things we normally do all the time in this kind of environment. So we'll have to try to work through that. But
yeah, because not everybody has access to this kind of stuff, and it's gonna be neat. It's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kyle, do you want to go next? That okay? Kyle Huschild from Little Blue NRD.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. Thanks, Dave. I'll keep it short too, hopefully. He's a tough act to follow, that's for sure. Everybody hear me okay, I assume. I want to thank DNR, first of all, for helping us get through our IMP. We adopted it last July. So thanks, Amy, Jesse, Jennifer, everybody that worked on that. I know it was kind of a painstaking process. We had to go through about 5 years worth of time put into getting our IMP. But we did get it approved. So now we're going to be doing the updates, I think, on a yearly or bi-yearly basis going out. So that should be an exciting process to work through. Good luck, Dave. I know it was a tough process for us, so good luck to you on getting through that. As far as our water levels, along with Dave, we did have a rise. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. 1.6 feet is what we had district-wide. Some areas we had up to 3 foot of rise, and other obviously not so much to get that average of 1.6, but we did have another rise, which moves us farther away from our stays and allocation point. They started taking water levels in 1974. At that year, they set the water level at 0. Since that time, we've gone down to negative 4.5. So we lost on average across the district about 4.5 feet of our aquifer in some places. And then they set the level at 8. So we're about 3.5 feet away now from that allocation point, which is good. When I first started about a year ago, we were right at about 2 or 3 tenths away from that trigger point to go into stays. So since that point, we've gained about 3 foot or so in our aquifer, depending on where you're at. So the good news is we have moved farther away from the stays and the allocations being implemented in our district. We are 100% metered across our district. So we are tracking water use. I think last year we had an average between about 6 and 7 inches is what was applied across the district. My assumption most of that usage was actually to apply chemical fertigation or chemigation. On the surface water side of it, we were working on a few oxbow reconnects, is what we call them, and then weir projects. Out by Holstein, Nebraska, we had a series of 5 weirs that were put in stream. The idea behind the in-stream weirs is to kind of back that water up and then hold it in place for a while, so it had a chance to infiltrate, try to do a little groundwater recharge. And then a few other places closer to the bottom of our district, we had some oxbow reconnects that at one point or another, either man-made or natural, the oxbows were cut off. So what we did was we tried to reconnect those to kind of pool some water back up in those oxbows, same type of thing. All those projects we did put in monitoring wells, so we can kind of monitor if those things have changed the infiltration rate or the amount of water that is infiltrating to see if they're successful. So the Holstein project had pretty good damage from the storm, as you guys know, from the bomb cyclone. So we are out there. I'd say about 90% of the project was damaged. So we're working on EWP through NRCS money to get those rehabbed. We're hoping to get it done here in the next month or two, hopefully, to get those wrapped up. Same with the Oxbow projects, had a little bit of damage. So we're just working on getting those things cleaned up so we can get them closed out by the end of our fiscal year, hopefully, which is July 1st. We are working through a hazard mitigation plan. Hopefully we can get that accepted here in the next couple months so we can start getting our hazard mitigation plan on task. We're partnering with Lower Big Blue on that one. From what I understand, it's like the 3rd biggest in the country. So that's kind of a big deal by tying all of our communities and rec areas and just the residents of our 2 districts together to kind of get this big HMP hazard mitigation plan put together for the para district. So that's kind of fun. We're actually hosting it this year. So Dave, hang on. I'll just send the bills. So good luck with what you get on your end of it. Other than that, vadose zone sampling we had planned for this year as well. With the warmer weather that we had, we never got good frost on the ground where we felt comfortable we could get the rig out and either not get stuck or do damage to the fields. So we're going to delay that till next year. Hopefully we get a little bit colder weather, get some good frost on the ground so we can get our rig out and get some good vadose zone samples in. And with that 319 grant we're using for the vadose zone, we also are upping our education. So we wanted to try to do some demo fields. If anybody's familiar with what they did up there in the Brazil area, we're going to kind of mirror that a little bit, go out and get some cover crop demo fields on some different areas across the district, just kind of get just to kind of get it started that there's other options for that water quality with using cover crops and stuff like that. So with that, I think that's all I've got for now, Jesse. Any questions, I'd be more than happy to field them.
Okay, thanks, Kyle.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, well, we'll turn to Upper Big Blue NRD, and I think Dave, do you want to take that or
yeah? Thank you, Jesse. I'll start out. We're going to tag team it. Marie and Jack and I will have a portion of this. On the screen, you will see a 4-page written report generated by Jack and Marie. So they'll talk about the details in the report since they wrote it. I'd like to thank my staff, Marie, Jack, and Crystal, for participating in this. And I would be very remiss if I didn't notice the 2 board members that we have participating, Larry Moore and John Miller. Without their leadership, my job would be much more difficult. So with that, Marie, could you briefly, and both of you guys briefly this time with the Zoom format, we'll go through this report, but just hit the highlights if you would, please. You have to unmute.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, we'll briefly kind of go through this. Our well construction is staying very steady. In 2019, we only had 44 new wells and 11 replacements constructed for the entire year. Our total number of irrigation wells has been staying pretty steady at about 12,210 to 12,220. Just like the other districts in Kansas, we saw an increase in our groundwater levels of 3.67 feet since the spring of 19, which takes us to 8.78 feet above our allocation trigger. So that's good news with everything that farmers are having to deal with right now. I'm glad we aren't having to try to implement an allocation. Our certified acres, again, we've kind of plateaued. Although farmers are still finding acres here and there to develop. So last year, from 2019, we had about 1,114 acres developed. Groundwater withdrawals, we only had our district average with our pooling, which I'll kind of explain here in a second, was only 2.2 inches of average groundwater withdrawal for the 19 pumping season, which is the lowest that we have on record. This number is derived. We do, within our rules, allow for the pooling of acres by owners and operators or by common wells. So that for us is our next challenge for data management tracking, was how we manage these pools. We currently only do pool assignments once a year. So we were looking for a way to make that a little bit more dynamic as our data changes. So we were awarded, as Jesse had mentioned, a water sustainability fund grant to contract with Olson's, and then a subcontractor company out of Portland, Oregon, to help us develop a tool to better track our pools as owners and operators change and as wells change to the lands that they are watering. So that project they're working on. We just had our kickoff meeting about a month ago. Hoping to have that ready to unveil in the fall when we start our water use reporting. It will be an online portal that will piggyback on top of our online reporting platform that we have. So farmers can not only look at what their individual well was pumping, but they can look at how that well fits within their pool for larger management. And we're hoping that even though we're not using it as an allocation tracking tool at this point, we can use it as an educational tool to help farmers better understand their water usage and how it fits over all of their acres. Groundwater quality, we did not have any new zone come into phase 2 management for groundwater quality in 2019. The map here, and it shows kind of what our median nitrate level is in our management zones. Everything is holding fairly steady. We'll begin doing that sampling for 2020 in June. We are continuing to do our arsenic, uranium, and selenium sampling from our dedicated nested monitoring well sites. This is year 3, where we have been collecting samples 5 times a year from our dedicated sites. And we're going to start putting that data together and work with the University of Nebraska to do some analysis and maybe try to set up some sort of a protocol for a sampling. You know, what types of things do we need to look at as far as well construction, geologic formation, when choosing wells to sample for these 3 nutrients. We are also continuing our Dakota Aquifer sampling in the eastern part of our district, where we get into some of the glacial areas. That's something we've been doing for approximately about 7 years, just trying to monitor the quality in those samples as guys are pumping from them. Our Project Grow, which is a cooperative partnership program between the Upper Big Blue and the city of York on some of their well field property, has still been going strong. We received initial funding through NACD, and then now are working with funding on a source water protection grant from the Department of Environment and Energy to continue some crop rotations, soil health demonstrations, those types of practices on those acres in the well field. And spinning off of our Project Grow, we were approached by the Nature Conservancy last summer to partner on a project with some private funding from large corporations to do a cover crop interseeding project. And this will be our first year kicking that program off. We have 11 producers scattered very nicely across our district who want to look at different ideas in the way of seeding cover crops during the season. So we've got guys that are going to want to start at V2 on their corn, doing some seeding. We've got some that want to start at V4. We have a couple different cocktail mixes of cover crop seed that we're going to be demonstrating. And we're going to do a little time-lapse photography project where we can see that cover crop germinate. We can see the crop canopy over, and then that canopy open up and that cover crop take off. That's our goal, I should say, for the project. And then along with that, then another spinoff has been another Nature Conservancy project that could be kicking off here in 2022, which is a soil health, sustainable ag carbon project with the Nature Conservancy and another set of large private companies. The Ag Water Monitoring Network Demonstration Network has continued to grow, and we get new farmers every year that are using watermark sensors or capacitance probes. One thing that is not in here that I should probably report on is in the last year, we have had a large number of livestock facilities coming into the northeast and eastern corner of our district. When Costco decided to put in their chicken processing plant in Fremont, and they started looking at where can we start growing all of these birds that would go through that facility. We've had a number of facilities coming into what our board has designated as high-risk groundwater areas. So that's been a challenge for our board and the staff, monitoring. We're looking at potentially between 50 and 100 barns split out into different areas. I think the largest one in our district is 24 barns in one, but if you move across the boundary to the Lower Platte North, they've got some that are 48 and larger facilities coming in. So that's been something really big for us, and looking at the groundwater usage and metering and working with those facilities. With that kind of takes over the water. Jack, I will turn it over to you to talk about our other programs.
Okay, I'll just briefly touch base on our land treatment program for soil and water conservation cost share. That was down quite a bit in 2018, basically because of the weather. Our contractors couldn't get out and put in some of these practices. We've had to kind of pick up quite a bit this spring, so we think we'll have a better year this year as far as cost share. Also, our variable rate irrigation program, some of the pivots didn't even get turned on, so it's kind of tough to maybe push that program, but we still have it in place. We'll see how it goes this summer. Private dams programs continues. We had a couple larger dams that were supposed to be put in last year that got delayed by the weather. They're going in this spring. Like Dave, we do have dam maintenance come up. A lot of our facilities are getting 40 to 50 years old. I would like to thank Dave and his staff at the Lower Big Blue for helping us with the slip lining project. So we're learning the ropes from them, and I really appreciate that. That's all I have.
Thank you, Jack. Jesse, as you know, things continue to evolve here. We're trying very hard to protect the citizens and the staff that I have in this trying time. But we have a job to do, and this district will continue to do that job, whatever Mother Nature throws at it, whether it's the COVID virus or too much water, too little water. So that concludes our report, Jesse.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. I know, Chris, you had Ms. Schwartz go ahead and do an update as part of Kansas report. I also see down the agenda we have a spot for the advisors to do reports. Do you want me to have Mr. Moore do his report now, or would you prefer it be down the agenda?
I don't have a preference at all. If he'd like to report, that'd be great.
Okay, Larry, you want to go ahead?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is you can teach an old dog new tricks. This last 2 months have been a real education in the use of computer. I'm doing things I should have been doing. What I'm being forced to do now. My one observation I would say in our district is, I think I speak for all the districts, it's a relationship between the districts and the various departments down to Lincoln have never been better than they are now. And I've been involved in this for over 45 years, so I got a pretty good experience in this. Right now, we don't always agree on everything, but we always agree to talk to each other. That's big. That's a big change. In our district, they pretty well recovered it. The thing that's kind of hanging fire right now is we had been working with nitrogen management, and we were about to the point where we thought we were going to come to a decision on it, and now we're kind of waiting until we can all get together face to face to put it to bed. We've had a lot of dialogue on it, and everybody agrees there's a problem. Everybody agrees that there should be a solution, but 90% of the people that come to talk to us say, I'm doing a perfect job. It's the other guys that are screwing it up. And we're having a little trouble with that, but I think we're going to work through it. Otherwise, things are going pretty good up here, all things considered. And I never thought it'd get to this stage, but I'm amazed how the staff's carried through. The reports we get from the staff are as good as they ever were. So thanks a lot to them, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate in the Zoom session today. But like I said, you can still teach an old dog new tricks.
No, that is definitely true. So we're all learning, I think, as this whole situation unfolds. So thanks for your report, Larry. I guess, Chairman, that concludes Nebraska's report.
Chris, are you and Elizabeth ready to do the Secretary's report?
Yes, sir. I believe we are. As I noted before, I am the Secretary of the Compact Administration, but I've delegated that this year to Lizzie Hickman. So I'm going to turn it over to her and have her present the minutes and report for the 2019 annual meeting.
Yes, I'm Lizzie Hickman with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Division of Water Resources. So first, I'm going to cover agenda item 3, which is the minutes and report of the 46th annual meeting. A final draft of that report from last year's compact meeting has been completed and was very recently provided electronically to the compact commissioners and federal chair. Staff from both Nebraska and Kansas have reviewed and approved this current draft, and upon the approval of the commissioners, we'll ask that the federal chair sign the letter to the president, and that both he and the commissioners sign the minutes where indicated on page 17 of that report. Given the current restrictions on face-to-face meetings, our plan is to have Kansas sign the annual report and then mail the signature page to Nebraska, who will then mail it to the chair, who will then send it back to Kansas. So are there any comments or questions regarding last year's report or our plan for obtaining signatures at this time? If not, I offer last year's minutes for approval by the administration.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to adopt the minutes and report for the 2019 annual report.
And I would second that motion.
You're on mute, Don.
You're on mute there, Don.
All those in favor of the motion and the second indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. Approved.
So
Go ahead.
I was just going to move on to the secretary's report if you're done.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'll now continue on to the secretary's report. The current process for creating the minutes in the annual report has been working well, so we'll plan to do the same thing this year. To briefly summarize that process, for those presentations given during the meeting which have an associated written report, we collect electronic versions of those reports And we develop the minutes by summarizing the meeting from an audio recording. I think this year we would have a video recording that we could use as well if we wanted to. The electronic reports are then attached to the minutes in a single PDF document. Once the complete annual report has been signed, it is made available for the states to post publicly on their websites. If any members of the administration would like a paper copy of the annual report, they may request that as well once the report has been signed. If you gave a presentation during this meeting and have an associated written report or electronic presentation that you have not yet provided, please provide us with an electronic copy so that we can attach that to the 2020 annual report. Additionally, because we're meeting virtually this year and because the recorded live stream of this meeting is going to remain available on YouTube for future viewing, Kansas is making this year's report attachments publicly available in a table on our Big Blue River Compact page on our website, so that anyone viewing the meeting can follow up with those reports if they choose. Are there any questions? If not, then this concludes the Secretary's report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 8, Treasurer and Budget Report. Amy, would you like to do that?
Yes, thank you. I'll assume everyone can hear me. If not, just wave or something. Okay, thanks. We have attachment A up on the screen here. And I have 2 attachments in the treasurer's report, attachment A and attachment B, that will be shown up here on the screen. So our beginning balance as of July 1st, 2019 was $27,084.18. So we have 2 sources of income. We have our state assessments at $9,500 a piece, $19,000 for both. And then we had some interest income of $74.31. So our total income there is listed $19,000, $74.31. Okay, so our expenses to date have been for the state line gauges. So we paid USGS $16,198. And then we have the observation wells that we pay $680 to Lower Big Blue NRD. And then we also did 4 accounting reviews for $3,800. I'll mention those in just a minute. And so our total expenses are listed there, and our balance on hand is $26,250.49. So then moving down to the estimated expenditures, we don't have any. Thanks for moving down a little bit there. We do expect to have a little bit of income from interest. We estimated that at $15. And so we estimate that our balance at the close of this fiscal year will be $26,265.49. And then I will move on to attachment B, which is our budget record. Thanks. Okay, so we have here listed, as we do, as we have the other years that I've done this, 6 fiscal years. And so we go back a few years and look forward 2 years. And so the first 3 columns are showing our actual expenditures and income for fiscal years 2017, 18, and 19. You'll see at the bottom there, our ending balance, it kind of ranged from about $24,000 to almost $28,000. So it average, it was about $26,000, our ending balance for those 3 years. So moving on to fiscal year 2020, we have this one divided up by actual and estimated expenditures and income. So as I just went through, our expenditures are listed there for the gauges and the wells, and then the financial review. So this $3,800 for the financial review is more than what we've typically seen. And that's because last year we decided we needed to do a little bit of catch up on those. So we actually ordered 4 financial reviews. Those were for fiscal year 15, 16, and then 18 and 19. And so that came out to $3,800. So now we are all caught up and we're actually almost a year ahead of how we kind of used to do it. But those were our expenses, and then it shows our income. So right now we're sitting at the $26,250, and then also the estimated, which I just went through. So moving on to the yellow column, that's for fiscal year 2021. This is what's proposed for consideration today. And so how we do this is we just put in our typical expenditures, but we add 3% to allow for increased costs. So with that increase, we've estimated state line gauges at 16,500, observation wells at 700. We do include line items for printing, postage, and miscellaneous expenses. We haven't had those expenses in a while, but we have included those historically, and they're included here. We estimate our total expenses will be $17,600. And then our income would be the same types of income from state assessments and also from interest. And so we estimate that our ending balance would be $27,715.49. That's the proposed budget for next year. And then we have a projected budget. That's the final column there for fiscal year 2022. Same thing, we added 3% to the gauge cost and observation wells. And I also added that to the financial review because we've noticed that those have kind of gone up in price over the years. And so we estimate the expenses there would, oh, and also I should mention that we have the, the accounting review is at $1,900. And that's because we do those every other year. So that review would cover fiscal years 2020 and 21. And so that would bring our expenses for fiscal year 2022 to $20,000. Same types of assessments and interest for income. And then we would project that our ending balance at that time would be $26,765.49. So those are the two main attachments with our current situation and then also our budget. Also with this year's report, I've included the last 2 years of audit reviews or accounting reviews. So those are included as an attachment that could be incorporated into the minutes. That's what I have. Are there any questions?
Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to accept the budget as presented in the treasurer's report.
I second that.
We will move on to the vote on the main motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed by the sign nay? Passed. The next item agenda will be the U.S. Geological Survey report. Jason, are you ready? Jason Lambrecht?
Sorry about that. There we go. Hi, folks. Can you hear me just fine?
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you. And yeah, no, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I'm not a Zoom guy. USGS uses something called Teams, and I'm very experienced with it. But in Zoom, yeah, I didn't make my camera work well for this at all. But just to give you guys a brief update, well, first of all, thanks to Chris and all for setting this up. I think this is a nice way of getting together and taking care of the business, but I sure miss the opportunity to get together and shake hands and drink a cup of coffee with folks. And also thanks again to Don for chairing this. I have the pleasure of sharing a car with Don now and then when we attend this meeting. So sorry we missed that this year also. Just talking a little bit about the USGS operations in the Blue River Basin. The USGS operates 6 stream gauges on the Big Blue River. including the compact site at the state line at Barnston. And the Barnston gauge actually has the longest record of all the 6 stream gauges in the Big Blue River Basin. Then in the Little Blue River Basin, we operate 5 stream gauges, which includes the compact gauge of the Holland, Kansas. Just upstream of the Holland, Kansas gauge is the Fairbury gauge, and that one is just about to tap at 100 years old, 97 years this year. Moving on a little bit to some of the updates with the stream gauges themselves. It was a very wet year. What I'm going to tell you just very much agrees with what Katie discussed earlier and what Jeremy discussed earlier. We finalized our discharge records for water year 19, and when we say water year 19, that was October of 18 to September of 19, and that's the report that we produce for the compact every year. So we finalized those records for that back in around March 1st of this year, and we've been actually working on a more real-time basis yet. I believe up until probably about mid-March of this year, that record is all approved right now too and available for the public to view on our NWIS webpage. For water year 19, the USGS made 13 discharge measurements at Barnston and 11 at Holland, and we use these for computing our final discharge record. And on a normal year, we seem to make 15 to 20 measurements at each of these sites. But being that the water was always high at both of these sites this year, we weren't really trying to catch the highs and the lows and the highs and the lows. It just kind of stayed up top. We would just keep tapping at it. At Barnston, just digging into some of the stuff from our report now, at Barnston, the annual mean discharge for water year 19 was just over 2,500 cubic feet per second. And just to give you an idea, the historical mean discharge after 87 years of record at that site is 858 CFS. So this was 3 times higher than the historical mean discharge, and similarly about 3 times higher than what it was last year. So this is a significant year, actually. In fact, this Barnston mean discharge for water year 19 was ranked as second highest in 87 years of record. Now, that said, second highest in 87 years of record, you would expect that we would have had one of the highest peak instantaneous flows at Barnston. And quite frankly, no. The maximum instantaneous flow was on March 17th of 2019 at 25,700 cubic feet per second, and this was only the 18th highest on record. So 18th highest out of 87 years of record, but the second highest for the mean for the year. Moving on to Holland, kind of a similar story. The annual mean discharge was around 1,400 cubic feet per second, and that was about 5 times higher than the previous year. And after 45 years of historical record at this Holland gauge, this year's annual mean discharge was 3 times higher than the historical mean discharge of 491. So 1,400 last year versus about 500 for annual mean. Now, an interesting thing also is that generally every year the annual mean moves up or down 3, 4, 5 cubic feet per second, depending on. So the magnitude of these 2 gauges over the past year was tremendous. It moved the annual means by over 20 cubic feet per second. That proves a really high trend. Now, the Holland mean discharge for 19, similar to Bardston, was also ranked second highest in 45 years of record. And again, there too, the maximum instantaneous for that year at Holland was 16,900 cubic feet per second. And I'm throwing a zillion numbers at you, I know, but that was in March of 2019, and that was the 10th highest peak instantaneous discharge on record. So again, second highest mean at both these sites. That says a lot for in both of these gauges. The lows for the year in water year 2019 hardly even reached or hardly even tapped at the average annual mean. And that's a real rarity, as Jeremy and others would tell you when trying to carefully watch flows and let folks know if they need to stop usage. And looking a little bit at this current year, and I think Jeremy tapped at it also, the discharges previously hadn't gone below the daily mean flows for quite some time, but in the last couple of weeks was the first time now where it's steadily dropping and it's below the average annual means. So we'll continue to see this downward trend, I assume, until we actually get some rain, because it's just been very dry, but we're moving into a very wet time frame. So we'll see. I think as we speak, we're looking at a good chance of pretty good rain here in the Blue Basin. That taps at the end of my report. Unless there's any questions, I'll hand it off to the next person.
If there are no questions, we'll continue on the agenda. The next item, since there was no meeting of the legal committee, there is no report this year. Jeremy Gailey, will you give us the engineering committee report, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Don. The engineering committee did not have any special assignments this year either. We didn't meet during the past year, but we report on a number of things that I'll include in this report. Generally speaking, as Katie and myself and Jason already rehashed during the May to September timeframe this year, there were no shortages for compact flows as illustrated in the USGS report. Also, there are exhibits A and B that have the same, roughly the same reports in it in the engineering report. Also, I'd like to thank Dave Claybaugh for providing the groundwater data. That is exhibit C for the report, provided by Lower Big Blue NRD for the groundwater levels from this most recent year. And the last component of the engineering report that we look at every year is a review of the active irrigation wells within the regulatory reaches within Nebraska. This year, there were no changes to that report. There were no new wells drilled in either of the big or Little Blue River basins, nor were there any wells that were eliminated this most recent year. That is all that I had for the report for the engineering committee. Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Jeremy. Also, the Water Quality Committee did not meet, as is traditional, prior to the compact meeting. So we have no report for 2020. We've heard from both advisors, but if either one would like to make some additional remarks, Mrs. Schwartz or Mr. Moore, we would welcome them at this point.
Nothing here.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Thank you. The question, you mentioned the poultry plants. So water quality, will you be monitoring the water quality in that area where the facilities are going in for the production of the poultry?
Oh, that's a good question. We do have a network of dedicated water quality sampling sites in those areas that we will continue to monitor. And Marty might be able to chime in a little bit more, but as part of their livestock permit, I believe they do need to put in monitoring wells that will need to be regularly sampled.
So will you be, are the production sites up and going right now?
I could answer part of that. In Butler County, I speak just Butler County alone. A one-time capacity now is in excess of 6 million birds at one time, and it turns every 42 days. And that's just the Butler County alone, and that's just a small portion because they process 2 million birds a week. And each one of those chickens doesn't drink very much water, but you got to realize that they drink 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, year round. And so we're really concerned. It's the water short area that has a very slow rate of recharge. And we're concerned that continuous slow withdrawal may negating recharge. We don't know. It's just come on so fast. 2 years ago, we thought there might be a half a dozen barns built up here. Now it's far in excess of 100. I don't know how high it is now, but they're just popping up every place. We thought they'd be maybe units of 4, and now most of the units are probably 8 to 12, as high as 48 barns in one group. So we're just learning a lot about it, but I don't think Marie has any more knowledge than I do right now. It's coming on so fast. We're watching it, and they're working with us, but they didn't, I don't think ahead on how many buildings they were going to put in this water short area when they started. I think they got themselves in a landslide on that. So we just have to watch it. We really don't know, but it's a significant problem. What there will be, I think.
I was just interested, and I guess that we'll find out by next year. Is that right?
Well, yeah, we'll know more. I don't know if we'll know it all yet. They're this last several weeks has kind of thrown everybody in turmoil. So it's kind of hard to tell what's going to happen in the future, but we're going to know more over the year, I'm sure. And they are trying to work with us, so I'm not too concerned from that point of view. But it's still
That's good.
a big thing to think about.
Yes, thank you.
In looking over last year's minutes and report, it does not appear that there is any old business. But if anyone has any suggestions, we would welcome them for the agenda and discussion. Moving on to new business, Chris, will you handle the Kansas proposed resolution?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Kansas would like to offer a resolution in honor of David Barfield, who I mentioned earlier has retired from state service and from the compact. So if you will indulge me about 2.5 minutes, I will read this to you all, and then I will offer a motion to approve this resolution by the administration. So this is a resolution of the Kansas-Nebraska Big Blue River Compact Administration honoring David W. Barfield. Whereas David W. Barfield served as ex officio representative of the state of Kansas on the Kansas-Nebraska Big Blue River Compact Administration from 2007 to 2019, and whereas Mr. Barfield has retired from his position as Kansas Chief Engineer and from the Kansas-Nebraska Big Blue River Compact Administration, and whereas Mr. Barfield did faithfully and diligently serve the Compact Administration as the representative of the state of Kansas, providing excellent representation, constructive insights, and a positive and collaborative attitude, now therefore be it resolved that the Kansas-Nebraska Big Blue River Compact Administration does hereby acknowledge and express its appreciation for the contributions of David W. Barfield to this administration, and extends to him the best wishes for continued good health and happiness in all his future endeavors. And be it further resolved that this resolution be entered into the records of the 2020 Annual Compact Administration meeting minutes and the 2020 annual report, and that the Compact Secretary be instructed to send a copy of the annual report to Mr. Barfield. Entered this 13th day of May, 2020, at the annual meeting of the Kansas-Nebraska Big Blue River Compact Administration. Mr. Chairman, that is the resolution, and I move that the administration adopt the resolution.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the resolution in honor of our colleague, David Barfield. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by nay? So adopted and put in the official record.
Thank you.
Chris, would you like to handle item number 16 concerning committee membership and special assignments.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I can certainly start out, and I would just offer that Kansas supports keeping the responsibilities of the states the same as they have been, with Kansas serving as secretary and Nebraska serving as head of the finance and engineering committees. And I'm actually not sure who chairs the legal committee, but maybe we can talk about that a little bit. But this year, the Kansas slate will remain with Katie Teetsort being on the engineering committee, but I would like to replace myself on the engineering committee with Elizabeth Hickman. Our representative to the water quality committee, Tom Stiles, will remain the same. Our legal committee representative, Kenneth Titus, will remain the same. I'd like to nominate Elizabeth Hickman on the budget committee this year. And of course, I'd like to nominate Lizzie for the role of secretary of the administration as well. And then I would just turn it over to Nebraska to fill in their slate.
Yeah, Chris, I think at this point in time, we're going to keep all of our committee assignments the same. I do suspect, though, particularly, once we get a new director and there's I think maybe a change we may make on some of those committee assignments as well. So we'll probably just handle that as the year goes on and provide that correspondence to the compact administration later.
Very good. Thanks.
Any objections to any of those assignments and appointments? Without objection, so ordered. I want to thank everyone who put together this Herculean effort to do a Zoom call annual compact meeting. Like many things that Kansas does, it has been a roaring success, and we're deeply appreciative. With that, I, Don Nelson, Compact Chair, adjourned this edition of the annual meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you all.
Everybody stay safe.
See you next year.
Hope so.
Hopefully in face to face.
I hope we see you next year. Take care, everybody.